In the 12th century BC, humanity didn't just lose a war, it lost its memory. Imagine living in a world of god-kings and global trade, where gold from Egypt and tin from the far mountains met in bustling high-tech ports. It was a world that felt invincible, but in less than a single generation, every single superpower on Earth was wiped off the map. Palaces were torched so thoroughly the stone literally melted. Trade stopped. Writing was forgotten. For the next 400 years, the world went silent. This wasn't just a crisis. It was the first total global apocalypse. This is the story of 1177 BC, the year the engine of civilization exploded, and why our own modern world might be closer to that same edge than we dare to admit. To understand the devastation, we have to realize that 3,000 years ago, the world was more like our own than you might believe. This was globalism 1.0. A merchant in a palace in Crete could eat from a plate made in Canaan while wearing jewelry made with gold from Egypt. The great kings, the pharaohs of Egypt, the Hittites of Turkey, and the kings of Babylon, treated each other like brothers. They exchanged diplomats, expensive gifts, and royal brides. But this entire world rested on a single fragile recipe: bronze. In the ancient world, bronze was like oil or microchips today. If you didn't have it, you didn't have an army, and you didn't have an economy. But to make bronze, you need two things: copper and tin. Copper was plentiful in Cyprus. But tin was rare. It had to be hauled from the mountains of modern-day Afghanistan or as far away as Britain. This meant that the Bronze Age world was a massive high-performance machine that required every gear to turn in perfect synchronization. If the trade routes from the east were cut, or if a single port fell, the entire world ground to a halt. The infrastructure for global disaster was perfectly laid out. This society, seemingly so robust, was about to face a perfect storm it could not see, could not understand, and could not fight. The collapse didn't have a single cause. It was a multiplier effect. First, the climate turned. Modern science, studying pollen counts in lake beds, has revealed that around 1200 BC, a massive century-long drought hit the Mediterranean. The medieval warm period of the Bronze Age ended abruptly. Harvests failed. In a world of population explosions, there was suddenly no food. Then came what geologists call earthquake storms. A series of massive tectonic shifts rocked a region for 50 years, literally shaking cities like Troy and Mycenaean to pieces. Imagine the terror. The gods were not only refusing to send rain, they were literally tearing the earth apart beneath your feet. As the famine grew, the social fabric began to tear. The god-kings were supposed to be the bridge between heaven and earth. If they couldn't bring the rain, what use were they? Internal rebellions broke out. The peasants, starving and desperate, looked at the glittering palaces and saw not glory, but the cause of their misery. The system was already screaming, and then the ships appeared. History calls them the Sea Peoples. They weren't just a single army. They were a terrifying migrating confederation of tribes. Some were raiders, but many were refugees themselves, fleeing the same droughts and chaos that were killing the empires. One by one, the dominoes began to fall. The Hittite Empire, a superpower for 5 centuries, simply stopped existing. The Mycenaean palaces in Greece were systematically torched. In Egypt, Pharaoh Ramses III fought a desperate, bloody naval battle to keep them at bay. He won the battle, but the cost was so high it broke the back of the Egyptian empire forever. This is the systemic collapse. Because everyone was so connected, the fall of one city led to the death of another. When the Hittites fell, the tin stopped flowing. When the tin stopped, the Greeks couldn't make weapons. When the Greeks couldn't make weapons, they couldn't defend against the Sea Peoples. The complexity that made them strong was now their executioner. The unbreakable fortress of the Bronze Age had been breached from within and without. When the dust settled, the world was a quieter, darker place. The loss was so total that in places like Greece, people actually forgot how to write. For 400 years, the Dark Age reigned. The grand palaces were replaced by small mud brick villages. People looked at the massive stone walls of their ancestors and believed they must have been built by cyclops, monsters, because they could no longer imagine how mere humans could have achieved such things. But out of this ash, something new was born. Without the monopoly of the Bronze Age kings, a new, cheaper metal became common: iron. Without the old empires, small nations like the Phoenicians could emerge, creating the alphabet that you are reading right now. The Bronze Age collapse is the greatest trauma Western civilization ever endured before the fall of Rome. It shattered the optimism of the ancient world and proved the fragility of human systems against the power of nature and interconnectedness. For centuries, this was treated as a distant myth. But empty shelves, broken supply chains, fear of a changing climate. Does that really sound like ancient history? Or does it feel uncomfortably familiar? The collapse was a test of civilization, and just like the Black Death, it reminds us that the higher we build, the further we have to fall.